It is time now for Morning Rounds. Joining us are CBS News chief medical correspondent Dr. John LaPook and CBS News contributor Dr. Holly Phillips. This week, the American Heart Association put out its first guidelines for preventing strokes in women. John?
Vanita, strokes happen when a blood vessel in the brain bursts or is blocked, and they're the third leading cause of death in women.
3 years ago, Cheryl O'Connor, a registered nurse, became her own patient when she suddenly had trouble forming words.
As a nurse, I said, this feels funny. I got up and I went into the bathroom, did a quick neuro exam on myself. I said, okay, something's not working right.
At age 49, she was diagnosed with a stroke. Dr. Andrew Russman is a neurologist at the Cleveland Clinic.
Well, I think it's very important that we have a set of guidelines that raises awareness among women, especially women who don't traditionally think of themselves at risk for stroke.
For both sexes, risk factors include age, high blood pressure, smoking, and high cholesterol. Today's report outlines the unique risks women have, including gestational diabetes, use of birth control pills, especially for those who smoke, are hypertensive, or have clotting problems, and high blood pressure during pregnancy, which can lead to a condition called preeclampsia. Women with a history of preeclampsia have an increased risk for stroke even 30 years later and should be closely monitored. Other factors that impact women more than men include an irregular heartbeat called atrial fibrillation and severe headaches called migraine with aura. O'Connor had a history of severe migraines.
I just figured my migraines were because, like they had told me years ago, it was the hormones. And so I didn't, and I never would have equated it with a stroke. Never.
So, John, how many women are we talking about that actually have a stroke?
Every year, it's more than 400,000 women. That's a ton. And this is really changing my practice because I didn't realize things like preeclampsia stayed as a risk factor 30 years later. I'm going to change the way I take a history.
What are the warning signs, John, for a stroke?
Well, there's a nice thing called FAST, which is a good mnemonic. F is for face, so a little bit of drooping, sort of like that. One side of the face is asymmetrical. A is for arm. If you try to raise your arm, maybe one of them you can't raise, and also leg, any kind of motor function. S is speech, so slurred speech, you can't get the words out. It's not just talking, it's understanding too. And then T is time. Time is so crucial. The quicker you get to the hospital, the more they can actually take action that could prevent long-term problems. Call 911, of course.
Is there anything women can do on the prevention end?
Absolutely. We're talking about risk factors. You've heard about high blood pressure control, diabetes prevention, watch your sugar, know your cholesterol. You want to exercise, you want to eat right. The number one thing, do not smoke. And I'll tell you something, if you have a history of migraine with aura, you are simply not allowed to ever take one puff of a cigarette.
All right. Also this week, CVS, one of the country's largest pharmacy chains, announced it will ban the sale of cigarettes, John, this is for you, and tobacco products at all of its stores. CVS Caremark president and CEO Larry Merlo announced the new policy right here on CBS This Morning.
It's a real contradiction to talk about all the things that we're doing to help people on their path to better health and at the same time sell tobacco.
Holly, this was a pretty surprising announcement.
It was a really bold move. But when you consider it is hypocritical for a brand like CVS, which is moving into the health and well-being space, they're really putting themselves there. It is hypocritical for them to sell products which contribute to the #1 cause of preventable death, which is smoking. Many of the pharmacies have clinics with doctors and nurses and pharmacists that interact with patients. And of course, the first advice they're going to give everyone to protect their health is quit smoking. A little hypocritical if the cigarettes are right there for sale.
Not surprisingly, the president immediately applauded this decision. But what has been the general reaction from everyone else?
Oh, Vanita, overwhelmingly positive. Again, the American Medical Association was all behind it, the American Heart Association. And as you pointed out, President Obama himself said CVS is setting a really powerful example.
They are obviously, though, going to take a pretty sizable economic hit from this. There are a lot of sales in cigarettes. Are other pharmacies considering following suit here?
Well, Anthony, we've actually contacted Walgreens, another top pharmacy, and they are not going to stop selling cigarettes yet. They did point out that they also sell products to help people quit smoking. But I wouldn't be surprised if, as the future goes on, we see other people following suit. I think it's the right thing to do.
That's right. It always takes one for everyone else to get in line.
Absolutely.
The National Institutes of Health announced an unconventional new plan to speed up drug development for Alzheimer's, type 2 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, and lupus. Those 4 diseases affect more than 28 million Americans. Over the next 5 years, the NIH will collaborate with 10 large drug companies and 7 nonprofits to share research data. All results will be made public in the hope of finding effective treatments faster.
There was some good news this week in the fight against colorectal cancer. A report in the journal Annals of Internal Medicine says simple home tests can save lives. John, this is your specialty. Right. Why are these tests so important?
Well, it turns out that about a third of Americans don't get proper screening for whatever reason. And colon cancers can bleed. They have a tendency to bleed. And if you do a simple test of your stool and look for invisible blood, you can pick up colon cancer, and it turns out about 79% of the time you can pick up a colon cancer. So it's pretty good for screening for colon cancer. Of course, it can't do a biopsy, you can't take it out, and it's rotten. It's not very good at all for picking up polyps. It's polyps that we can find with colonoscopy where they're benign, and maybe in 10, 15 years they're going to become cancer, but you can prevent that from happening by just plucking them out.
Obviously, finding it is the hardest part. Is there anything new on that front in terms of how doctors can analyze what's going on inside?
Well, there's a new thing called a pill cam. For when I do colonoscopies, what you do is you try to advance the instrument, and it's a long and winding road sometimes. It's tough. Sometimes it's tough to get around a corner if it's angulated, if it's kinked, if there's previous surgery. And most of the time I can get all the way up, but sometimes I just can't. Well, there's a new thing. The FDA just approved the use of something called the pill cam for unsuccessful colonoscopies. And what happens is the person swallows the pill. It has a little camera, and it broadcasts to a recording device that the person has on their belt, and it goes all the way through. It takes a long time to go through, and then finally it just comes out. It's flushed away. You don't have to retrieve it, and then you can analyze the pictures and pick up cancer, polyps, other things.
Amazing. All right, and finally this week, as the Olympics get underway, superstitious sports fans are probably worried that the Russians might benefit from a home team advantage. And some new research shows it could actually be true. So it's true that the cheering crowd can actually affect athletes and referees even?
Referees, you can intimidate them. They say that the testosterone level goes up and all that. My favorite statistic from this study is that there's a 20% increase in home court advantage for every time zone that the opposing team travels, and it's worse when you go east. So I love that.
Absolutely. And no referee would want to be so unpopular. If you hear the entire crowd cheering for one side, you're not going to necessarily want to make that tough call.
They also point out there's a home court disadvantage where the home players are so nervous from all the support that they choke. Their cortisol level goes up and they choke. So who knows? But apparently, statistically, there is a home court advantage.
Scientifically proven. Dr. John LaPook, Dr. Holly Phillips, thank you both very much.